This is Michael and Rick here with the Endure Training Center. Today, we're going to talk about Rick's experience. Recently underwent some pretty crazy robotic heart surgery, and coming out on the other end of that, something unexpected came up with him, and that was the outpouring of support that he had throughout the process in the recovery. So we want to dial in, talk about relationships and what that means in the body of Christ. So Rick, good to see you. Looking great. Recovering. Glad to see that you're back at it, walking, doing some push-ups, some sit-ups, some calisthenics, just getting back in it. You're sporting the new office. So great to see you back on the podcast.
Yeah, it's good to be here, Michael. Thank you. It's been, I don't know, overwhelmingly good. It was a success. I expected to potentially be down. They said I'd be down a couple weeks and then maybe even a month before I could really get back to. But it's been, I've been really blessed. I was able to get up, get moving, and able to get back to doing pretty much regular stuff last week and started working out a little more intently as I go through. Nothing spectacular, but it's pretty good for having overcome or walked through surgery, and having it done robotically really is a blessing because you can recover so much faster, and you got so much more mobility. So
Yeah.
I'm really thankful and blessed.
So you had your heart surgery, robotic repair, and then, so do you just want to talk about a little bit, maybe what surprised you, I guess, coming out of that, like I alluded to just a minute ago, but just that level of support and the outpouring. You just want to share some thoughts that you had on that.
Yeah, so anytime, obviously being part of a church and a church family, a lot of people are, talk about praying for you and being there for you and things of that sort. And my situation, I had to go up to Atlanta to have my procedure done. And so that took me away from immediate local people. I mean, obviously, you're only talking about an hour and 30 or 40 minutes away. But it started right off the bat, man. I mean, obviously, my wife's there. My oldest daughter, middle child's there with my wife, and that's amazing to have both of them there. My daughter having to put a lot on her husband, my son-in-law, to take care of their children. They got a pretty busy life. They run a business and all that, but for her to sacrifice, and it was no easy thing for her to be there, but she made that commitment, and that takes a load off of me because I know she's right there with her mom, and brings great comfort to Lynn to have her there. But the morning of the surgery, I had to be there around 5 a.m. or had to be there at 5 a.m. We pulled in the parking lot about 4:50, and whipping right up beside us is this, Suburban. And I'm like, what in the world? This dude's flying in here, man. It's crazy. And it happened to be a friend of mine from church down here in Macon. And I guess he probably had to get up at 3 in the morning or better to, which I call last night, by the way. Anything before 4 o'clock is last night to me, not, but he showed up, and I was like, dude, what are you doing? I mean, they're only gonna let one person back there, and he goes, man, I come up here because I want to pray with you before you ever go back there. And so he had been there. I'm back up even. I had to go up for a pre-consult. I had to go for preoperative appointment, and even both of those, my wife hates driving to Atlanta, so she's like, hey, if you need me to go, I'll go. And I said, nah, I got it. But I had two friends, one on each occasion, was like, hey man, I want to ride up there with you. And it's pretty boring. It's a doctor's appointment, right? And but they just insisted to be present, and not only be praying, but to be present in that situation. And then my pastor, Chris, he was there, right, to pray before the procedure, and had multiple men come up. One came up even afterwards. They drove up specifically to drive Lynn's car back so all of us could get together and drive back. And then overwhelming people just, bring meals, come offer to cut my grass. I mean, just anything. And I don't know, maybe I should have milked it more, bro. I don't know, maybe I should have laid out longer. I could have got some stuff, but
Yeah, man, come get a back rub or
Yeah, I don't
You
know if I
know,
want that from these grizzly dudes.
get you some
But
of that peach ice cream.
yeah, I did get some the other day, and
Stuff is
but
legit.
yeah, but it is amazing, man. And plus, I tell people, just kind of joking, but maybe it's true. I said, I bet God's up there like, look, y'all, enough. I done heard this dude's name so many times. I got it. So yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
The two words I guess that come to mind when I think about just your experience is the idea of life together. And I guess I realized I quasi stole that from a book I got from a friend of mine, recommendation Adam, by Dietrich Bonhoeffer, Life Together. But I really think that encompasses the importance of the fellowship of believers. And one of the
Mhm.
things that he talks about in his book that I never really thought about, but it really is it's a privilege to have that fellowship and have those relationships. And he just talks about, missionaries and foreign lands where there's maybe just them, a husband and or a wife or a small family or a very small group in a hostile land, or believers that are in, I think about like in countries like North Korea or some of these other heavily persecuted places where believers are isolated and persecuted for their faith. So really just that ability for us specifically in the United States to have life together as a Christian body is just is a gift, and it's
Yeah.
by the grace of God. And it's something that is encouraging. And I think it's also important for us to realize that, when I look at your life, and obviously we've known each other now for a long time, but that outpouring that you have in support doesn't surprise me because I think that speaks to a lot of who you are and your willingness to drop everything to do that for other people around you. So I think that's one important takeaway is, if you don't have that in your life. And so for those that are listening, I just encourage you to think about, like, do you have those kind of friends, those kind of relationships where people will stop everything they're doing to come help when you have a time of need? And if not, might be a point of reflection as to why. Because I think again, part of that is I think we have to be willing to do that for others. And when you do that, I think you tend to cultivate relationships, hopefully that are healthy and mutual, to where you do that for others, and they're looking for the opportunity to support you when your time of need comes.
Yeah. So, immediately comes to mind is the verse in the Bible where it says, God comforts us so that we might comfort others, right? And you
Mm,
know me with these addresses, it's in there. Go Google it and search. It's a great verse, and it just says, God comforts us so that we can comfort. And I believe that God takes us through circumstances, some specific things so that we can be there when somebody else goes through those specific things. I've shared with you before we started, I had my procedure almost 3 weeks ago. We have a lady in our church that's having the same, very closely the same procedure done tomorrow. So obviously she's called me, she's talked to me, in concern. I had another lady reach out to me on Facebook Messenger that's having the same issues, lives in a different, and she just wants to talk. And I think my job is to share with her and help her understand that there's great doctors out there that do amazing stuff and that this procedure's got a huge level of success to it, and just reassure her and help her as she walks through what I walked through few weeks ago. So I think that's important.
yeah,
Um, I don't have you ever read the book Tribe by Sebastian Junger?
I listened to it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting because he talks about Native Americans and he talks a little bit about Asian culture a little bit and how, as Americans, we're less tribal, I guess you would say. But for the Native Americans in particular, um, that's huge, and it also, there's some research that shows they're able to go through traumatic events and deal with post-traumatic stress better than us because of that tribal nature that they have. And that was the purposes, I guess, of trying to developed transition centers during the Afghan and Iraqi war to try to
Mm.
put people with similar experiences together, so you could build these relationships that relate and help each other get through it. Um, but it's important from this is always, I guess, a year or two. It's 2022, so it's been a few years. I did a really in-depth study with a group here at our church about relationships, and I come across this, and it's interesting to me. In Genesis chapter 1, when you're talking about the creation, it goes through all the stuff that God created. And then verse 10, he had created, I think, the waters. Make sure I get this right. And God called the dry land earth, and gathering together the waters he called seas. And God saw it was good, right? And then he goes on to create the land, and he says it was good. And then he creates the livestock and animals, and he said it was good. And then he goes on to create all these things. And then verse 31, chapter 131, it says, then God saw everything that he had made, and indeed it was very good. But then you jump over to chapter 2, verse 18, and it says, and the Lord God said, it is not good that man should be alone. So he talks about all these things: good, 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 very good. Then he makes mankind, Adam, if you will, and he says, it's not good. It's not good that he should be alone. And we immediately connect that to him giving him a wife and Eve, which, okay. But the real issue is that just being alone, right? Now, obviously, it gives him Eve so they could procreate and reproduce and, you know, make the population. But the principle is that we're designed to do life together, right? And if you think about it, it all started with that. When they were in the garden, they were walking with the Lord. It was a relationship. God had a relationship with people, and I think that's important. It's also important to note that the very thing that Satan went after and tried to destroy was relationship. He pitted Adam against God. He pitted Eve against Adam, and that's what he still does today. I mean, you get a church or body of believers that's really doing things and on fire for the Lord, and Satan's going to get in there and try to break up a relationship. He's going to try to put some division between people, and uh, and that's going to cause a lot of problems and cause us not to feel the real purpose of God, and that's to love Him and love others.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
Yeah. As I was thinking about it, just not just relationships, or maybe to take it a step further, but, Christ-centered relationships. And I was just reflecting this morning about what that looks like and what that means. And just thinking about the nature of people and humans and personalities and sin, and just like we're imperfect, all of us,
that's right.
and that's just the nature of living in a fallen world. And so I was just, yeah, pondering, like, what does that mean when we have Christ-centered relationships? And part of that, I think, is grace for one another,
That's right.
forgiveness for one another, patience with one another, in our family, within the church family, within friendships. Because yeah, it's something that is so easy, I think, for the enemy to start to divide. And like you said,
Mhm.
churches are moving in a good direction, and then there's just sowing seeds of discord, small, subtle
That's right.
at times, and can really become very a bad thing, and can create division. And so yeah, I don't know. I think in this season in life for us, just realizing that people aren't perfect, to include myself, but when we really endeavor to center our lives on Christ and see how he lived his life and how he did community and fellowship and relationship, hopefully we can find some encouragement in that.
Yeah. Well, and you're right. I mean, as much as, and these are things this is not a manly thing to say, but, you know, our relationship through the years, obviously, when we were closer to each other, we could do more physically together, but we talk, not a lot, but enough to keep a connection in there. And there's no doubt I love you as a friend and that you mean a great deal to me. Your family means a great deal to me. I don't engage with your family much, but because they mean something to you, they mean something to me. If they
Hmm.
hurt, you hurt, therefore I hurt. So, I think it's more, but I'm also human and I'm gonna fail. I like to tell, especially young couples when they come in for premarital counseling, or maybe they're just coming in for some, to walk through some issues. But I always remind them, especially young ladies, is like, listen, that partner of yours cannot replace Jesus Christ. They're going to let you down. Even when you want to be someone's everything, that's a heavy burden to carry. And I can't be what Lynn needs. Lynn needs Jesus. And I
Hmm.
can be as close as possible to a representation of that, but I can't be Jesus, right? What she needs in a relationship with the Lord vertically so that we can have the best relationship with each other horizontally. And I think that's important to remember that the best horizontal relationships come from people who have healthy vertical relationships.
Hmm.
And I think that's extremely important for us to always remember. And it allows us, I think, to have that grace that you're talking about.
Yeah.
You know,
So
yeah.
if someone were to say that, okay, hey, I don't know that I have the greatest horizontal relationships.
Hmm.
Um, I'm going to put you on the spot with this question, but
Yep.
what maybe one or two questions that they could ask themselves to say, is it is it them? Is it me? Is there an
Mm.
area vertically in my relationship with God that maybe I need to take a look at? Like, what are your thoughts or
Yeah.
experiences there?
Immediately, the first thing comes to mind: are my expectations healthy? Do I have healthy expectations about this relationship? Right. And that goes back to what you want it. And all too often, that is a huge problem for us. Is like, because if your expectations are too high and they're too demanding, you're just not, I mean, you're going to experience failure a lot. Right. So I think right off the bat, that's the first thing I would say. And then to kind of coincide with that, um, am I asking this person to give me something that only God can give me? Right. Um, Ultimately, that relationship between you and the Lord is where things are repaired, restored, and redeemed. And that's what allows us to be good friends to others, and that's what allows us not to have unhealthy expectations of others.
That's good. Yeah, the expectations, and I think we had an episode a while ago talking about unrealistic expectations or expectation management. But so we've been in this town now for coming up on 5 years, which is the longest that Alicia and I or our family have ever lived in one place. Now by over 2 years, I think the longest was three or just under three. And there's elements of small town life that I really enjoy and appreciate, and there are elements of it, and especially being in rural farm town Iowa, that I could live without. One of them being the humidity, which you have no sympathy for me living in South
None
Georgia, right?
whatsoever. Yeah.
But I was so I'm coming up on retiring here within the next year, and it opens up opportunities. Obviously, a lot of almost a chance to reset in many ways. And so we were on vacation in Colorado recently, and got to see some friends in Colorado Springs, which was great. Got to do some hiking on the old Air Force Academy, which was really cool.
Nice.
Haven't been there in a long time, so went
Yeah.
back to the old stomping grounds and did a hike up Eagles Peak there with my family. And then we went up to the mountain, Silver Thorn, so right outside the Eisenhower Tunnel, and just got a little condo for I think 4 nights, just like right there in the mountains. And man, I loved it. Like we got to do a little rock climbing. Nobody was out there, just us and just our family. It was dry. It was really cool. I don't know. It was like high 70s, I think, low 80s. Just I just loved it. We came back to Iowa, and of course the air conditioning was turned up because we were gone. And I came in the house, and it was just like muggy as all get out. It was hot, and I was just like, ah, like well, it just and I've been just and this is no slight on a handful of my friends that listen here in Iowa. Well, obviously they know that I love them and appreciate them, but even for me, I've had to like wrestle with my own expectation management. Like there are elements of the mountains in Colorado in the West that just I love. Like it just being in the mountains, being in the dry air and the coolness and God's creation, and just like I just love it. Um, but the expectation management of living in the small town where I just really what Alicia and I have longed for, and that I think that we have found here is community and friendships and life together, and developing these relationships with people local. Obviously, you're a guy that I'm going to call when I have issues, but there's things that you can and can't help with, being that you live far, far away.
Mhm.
So developing those relationships here locally, I mean, it takes time, it takes commitment, and then you realize, like again, people are people, and we all have our own strengths and weaknesses and our flaws, and kind of just having to realize if you want to be rooted deeply in a community in relationships, like you've gotta you've gotta be willing to just do the life together. And I think coming back to what you said, like, are your expectations of the people, of the community, of the church, of these sports programs that I'm involved in, like, are those healthy and grounded in reality? And or am I looking to them to provide something that I should be looking to God to provide, that
Mhm.
relationship with Christ to provide in my life?
Yeah, and it's kind of the whole. Len and I love the area. We lived on Navarre Beach for a little while, and we love to get. Matter of fact, we're planning a trip down there for her birthday coming up soon. We're both excited
Which is
about it.
Florida for my,
Yeah.
non-traveling
Yep.
listeners, right?
Yeah.
Panhandle.
Navarre Beach, Florida, Panhandle. Yep. Near between Pensacola and Destin, and so and it's different, right? Again, expectations. Living somewhere is different than visiting somewhere, and
Mhm.
it's kind of like my grandkids, that like they don't understand if they lived with me or it would be different. Like I got to get up and go to work. I got to do this. We got to do yard work versus they visit me for 4 days. We don't do nothing. It's game on, playing all the time. It's a blast, right? But you think about that. And sometimes I think that causes us to not appreciate the things we experience in life for what they are. Like us not getting to talk on an everyday basis and not getting to experience, maybe the smaller pieces of life. But yet, I think that makes the time we spend together more precious or more
Mhm.
valuable, right? And so I just think you got to be careful um, chasing that feeling that comes from that experience too, right?
Yep.
And yeah.
Yeah, and that's what I think Alicia and I have just kinda re-grounded in, is, exactly your point. Like, going to visit is one thing, um, but there are, again, a lot of things about just where we're at that we really, really like, and
Mm,
so I think part of that is just realizing, even now and even being here for a while, like I think there's just it, and that's I think part of the military like lifestyle that gets becomes ingrained in you. Like it's just kind of like every 1 to 2 to 3 years is like, oh, time to go, and you start over, and it's exhausting in some ways, but the nice thing is, as you probably know, there's also elements that you just don't have to deal with because you have some kind of friction or tension, neighbors, church, whatever it may be. It's like, well, time to go, like got orders, I'm PCS and I'm out.
yep.
Like,
Yep.
see you, buddy. Nice to know you. So it's
And
yeah, I think
to some degree, it's an easy out too,
it
right?
it really
Instead of
is.
me having to look you in the eye and say, I'm not moving anywhere, but I'm not interested in continuing our
Yeah,
relationship, right? Versus, hey, sorry, dude, I'm moving to
yeah,
another state, but
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So it's just yeah, I think just the reality of what it takes to develop Christ-centered, healthy, deep relationships where when you're at a point and you need, someone that you can just do life with is just really,
Mhm.
which is just really, really awesome and encouraging, but it's, it's effort and it's work and it's imperfect.
When you think about it, even Jesus, when he sent out the apostles, the disciples, he sent them out in twos, right? At least twos. And again, I think that's because God knows, what they're going to have to endure, and it's not something you want to endure alone. And but it's true too. I mean, like I tell people all the time, even on the positive side, occasionally I'll go golf by myself, and I remember the first time I ever got an eagle, right? So par five, it takes 5 shots to get there. I'm going to put the ball in the hole in 3 shots, right? So
Oh,
two
wow.
less than normal. So, and I'm out there and it's late in the evening in Virginia, and boom, I hit it, and it's just me. There's not another person on the whole course, right? And I'm like, so I call my son to tell him, and he's like, well, who's with you? I said, nobody. He said, well, it don't even count then. I'm like, ooh, ooh. And, but it's true. It's like, that's why I try to explain to Lynn. I'm like, my wife, I was like, if you don't experience with somebody, you could tell somebody about it, but that common bond of experience is something special on the positive side, and then it's something to really help you endure on the challenging or negative side.
Yeah.
So, and this, let me say this too, while I'm in the middle of that. I think a lot of times we don't show up because we don't know the answer, or we don't show up because like I don't know what to say, or we don't show. I'm telling you, the power of presence. You don't have to say anything. This is something I've learned from Chris and watching and doing ministry. Just showing up and being present is huge. I mean, sometimes it's even better. Just close your mouth and be present, you know? And that means a lot to people who are going through difficulties. And it's certainly to make sure they know they're not alone. So, yeah,
Yeah.
important. Yep, important piece for that. And I get it. It is challenging because you're like, well, I don't know what to say, and I don't know what to do, and and sometimes Lynn will talk about the emotional scars she has if she goes into that environment. They get ripped open too, and it's like you're hurt all over again. But asking God for the strength to do that and overcome it is huge. So you can be there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. The theme of just showing up. I mean, I think that's something that we've talked about recently, even when it comes to just spiritual disciplines, reading the word. I was talking about this summer with the youth when I was teaching, and yeah, just like the power of showing up, the power of consistency. And I like we said, you don't even have to say anything. I think just the presence and showing someone with your actions, and by your intentions that you're there and you're supportive. I think that yeah, that speaks a lot.
Yep.
Um, and just allowing, trusting God to comfort people or to give them the wisdom and discernment that they need in that time. And that's something I was actually just praying about this morning as I'm preparing for next Sunday is like just desiring to be faithful with what I feel like God is wanting me to preach on, and then not allowing, but like trusting and recognizing like God is the one who's going to take what we do and use it, right? He's the one that causes the growth, and our job is just to be faithful and and do what we feel like God's asking us to do, but just likewise, yeah, just showing up, being there, and then
Mhm.
could even just be praying and trusting for God to use that to
Yeah,
minister to the person or the people or the family or whatever in ways that are going to encourage them and strengthen them.
yeah. Yeah, I don't think many people, if you don't experience it, you really don't comprehend. Like, it's not like you're doing a speech. When you get up there to teach or preach God's word, there's a weight of responsibility that is huge, right? And if you don't feel that, I would say, hey, don't preach, don't teach if you don't feel that. There should be some sense of uncomfortable, I'm not qualified, some sense of, you know, and the ultimate goal is just to be the vessel, right?
Mhm.
Let him work through you and do that. But I would say, having experienced that for a lot of years in my life, it's important for me, for you to know I'm praying for you, because in my prayers, not that other people can't pray for you too, but there's something different about my prayer because I've seen God work in me when I was, preparing and doing those things. So
Yeah.
I, I think that's always important too. Yeah.
Well, that's good, man. Any other thoughts that you want to share in terms of just relationships, life together as a body of believers? We've covered, God's design, and it's not good for man to be alone. Any other thoughts that you have?
Yeah. And I guess a more challenging part of relationships is, and this is something that has to be developed, but if you don't have this, especially as a person, a follower of Christ, but I would say anybody, if you don't have this, you really need to strive to build a relationship with somebody that can be honest and open with you, right? I think of Second Thessalonians 3:14 and 15. It says, and if anyone does not obey our word in this epistle, note that person and do not keep company with him, that he may be ashamed. Yet, it's important, verse 15, yet do not count him as an enemy, but admonish him as a brother, right? And elsewhere, Paul says, if you got a difficult situation and you're trying to help somebody overcome something and they just want to keep doing it, you may have to put them out of the fellowship in hopes that they'll long for the fellowship and return to that body. And that's the extremes of that. But one thing I'm really mindful of, even though I'm a associate pastor of a church, is I have to find those people who are going to call and ask me and check in to see what's going on, and have that vulnerability, that transparency with them to say, yeah, man, I'm struggling with this, or I'm struggling with that. And you're one of those people for me. And you've always been extremely candid and intentional to speak truth to me, not necessarily because all too often you get a friend, you'll say, hey, what about this? And, I've been struggling with it. And, oh, man, don't worry about it. That's just, you're probably thinking too much about that. I need the person that's going to be scriptural, the person that's going to say, hey, man, yeah, God tells us not to get involved in those things, or not to have that mindset. And so I think it's important, but it's hard to build that because, listen, the best and worst of life is relationships. And the one thing about a relationship, with a relationship that goes deep, is vulnerability, right? And it is you are very vulnerable when you share deep, right, things in your life, because there are people, if you was to share some of the struggles you got, they'd run away from you like you had a bad disease, man. And you got to be mindful of that and understand, who you're dealing with and what's going on. I tell people all the time, it's like children. I got a young couple that just shared me yesterday, was so excited because I'm always messing with them about when they're going to have a child. And they shared that they're pregnant now. They're like 14 weeks. And we're like, yeah, it was awesome. And I was sharing with the guy. I was like, man, it's the best and most challenging part of life. Like your kids and the love you experience with your children, is amazing, right? It's just, but it's also the most frightening because they can hurt you the most, right? And they can cause the most pain if something was to happen to them, or they get into something, right? And so I would say love is vulnerable. It is extremely vulnerable, and relationships are right there with it.
Yeah. Yeah, that just makes me think about Jesus and his life and his ministry and just how, and this is part of what I think I'm going to be preaching on this weekend or next weekend, but um, just how he stepped into the fray and he engaged in these relationships with people that were socially unacceptable by the Jews and the Pharisees and culture, and like went into the heart of relationships. And we've talked about recently, or a couple episodes ago. In my mind, it's always a couple episodes. It might have been six
Yeah,
months ago, right? But we talked about the woman at the well, where
yeah,
Jesus said, like, I have to go through Samaria, and he goes through there intentionally to meet this woman at the well.
hmm,
And it's just really it's just fascinating to me spending time thinking about, reading about, praying about Jesus and the relationship with the sinners and the relationship with the sick and the blind and the lame and the lepers, and just at that time I'm like, gosh, man, I can't imagine going to have sharing meals with the lepers, like
yeah, right.
arms are rotting off. And I just finished the book, The City of Joy, which is a beast, but it was basically about a priest missionary in India. And they're just talking about some of the things they dealt with when it came to leprosy and providing some
Mm,
very rudimentary surgeries for removal. And I'm just like,
mm.
yeah, it just boggles my mind thinking about Jesus, like stepping into the fray of some of that you just talked about. And it's convicting and it's encouraging to say, okay, I'm not there, but by the grace of God, and if I truly desire to become more and more like Christ and desire to become more sanctified, like hopefully I'm taking steps to being more like Christ and being willing to be inconvenienced or discomforted to reach those who need to hear the gospel, who need to know that God loves them and that Christ came and died to save them. And that's it's powerful, but it's not easy.
Yeah, and to a much lesser degree, as a pastor, we do a lot of visitation stuff. And I'm gonna be honest with you, man. There's times I'm like, man, I'm gonna go up here, just I'm gonna catch something. These people, I don't want to be sick, but just gotta trust the Lord, man, and do what you can and move on out, man. I've literally, this is confession time. I've literally been in a hospital room and I've like holding my breath as long as I can. And I take a little breath and hold my breath again. I was like, Lord, I don't want to get sick, but yeah, I think
They're
you just
talking to
gotta
you.
trust.
You're like, yep, hmm, yep.
Yeah. Yeah. But it's interesting, like you're talking about with Jesus, and how he was able to adapt to the company and engagement, always for the purpose of drawing them to the Father, though, right?
Yeah.
So, like, he would engage with those who felt unworthy or unloved, like you were talking about the woman at the well, the tax collector, da da da. But then you see him transition, and he would engage with the self-righteous and the prideful, the Pharisees, and all that. And it was really interesting as how he dealt differently, showing compassion, concern, reassurance, and encouragement, calling out the pride, calling out the arrogance and the peace. But it was always an act of love, trying to draw them to the Father. But he
Hmm.
knew what each one needed, and I would tell you from that's one thing I love about Chris, our lead pastor. He's a very encouraging person. He likes to encourage. He likes compassion and things like that, probably to more degree. But watching him you know, tell the emperor he don't have clothes on, or tell the person, hey, look, these issues, you caused them because of this sin. Um, but knowing how loving his heart is and how much he wants to be an encourager is it's always fascinating to me to watch him navigate that that spectrum and try to do it as much like Christ as he can.
Yeah. Yeah. And so maybe one closing thought that I have just on that note is another um, benefit of relationships and community life together is that people bring different strengths, different weaknesses to the table. And as a body of believers and as a group of friends, I think the ability to know, within the church, if somebody needs some encouragement or correction or discipline, whatever it may be, you could say, hey, I might be the best person to have that conversation with Jimmy, or maybe I'm not. I
That's
don't
right.
think that I could have that conversation in a way that would be helpful for whatever
Mhm.
reason. So therefore, old Joey, you might be the right guy to help him because he just would receive that different. And
Yeah.
that's, something that I'm realizing myself is that you have an approach, and I think always trying to be adaptive to be effective, but yeah, sometimes people just don't necessarily receive best from you, and so maybe it's better coming from somebody else. But that's the value of the body of believers, to
Amen.
have all of that, to be able to use and hopefully encourage one another.
Yeah. I just say that, no church is a perfect church. No body of believers is a perfect body or anything like that. And, some church do different things well. But one thing I will say about my experience here at this particular church I'm in now is, man, they love one another. They love one another. Like, just watch it. And I tell people all the time, it's not because of the pastors and it's not because of the staff. It's not even because of the teachers. We have these things called care group leaders in every small group that we have. And those are the people that connect, do exactly what you were just saying. They find the person that they think can connect with this person in their time of need the best, and they put them together. And it's awesome to see the love of Christ displayed in the relationships and what's going on. Yep.
Well, I was taking some notes here as we wrap up. So 4 points that I had, and then I can turn it over to you if you have any closing thoughts, and then I might ask a few questions to the listeners. But 4 points that I wrote down when it comes to relationships. One, you said, are my expectations healthy? Are they too high or too demanding? I thought that was a great point. Number two, the power of presence in relationships, sometimes just showing up,
Hmm.
says the world. Number three, honest and open relationships, having authenticity and vulnerability is really important. And I'd caveat authenticity and vulnerability with people that you trust, as we've talked
Amen.
about on here as well. Doesn't mean you got to open up the world to somebody, but as you build relationship and trust, having at
Hmm.
least somebody that you can be honest with to share in your struggles or temptations or whatever they may be, because trying to battle those alone in isolation is a recipe for the adversary to eat your lunch. And then
Yep.
last, the point that you made, just the importance of really truly loving one another, um,
Hmm.
with our shortcomings, our sins, our imperfections, our temperaments, whatever it may be, but
Hmm.
genuinely loving one another like Christ loves the church is an important aspect of healthy and good Christ centered relationships.
Yep.
Any other points that you would like to
Now, I
close
just go
with?
back. The only other thing I would say is, I think this is true for everybody, certainly true for me. The better I tend to the vertical relationship,
Mm,
the better I am horizontally. The more, the deeper and the more intimate And the closer my relationship is to God, the better a friend I can be to everybody else. And that's been true for me for all my life, really, but certainly became more prevalent as I surrendered my life to Christ. And true to this day. I mean, sometimes I go through the motions or I let things get in my life. I'm not dealing with some certain sin, and I can tell that it impacts my ability to be good friends to others. So
Yeah. Yeah. Even lately, when I've been getting frustrated with my kids or whatever, that's something I've kind of been doing some self reflection, self assessment. And obviously, I mean, kids are kids, and some of the stuff I think you're valid for being frustrated, but yeah,
yeah,
lately it's just kind of been like, okay, there's probably it's more something a reflection of me, and so that's just a great reminder that you just had there. That was I like that point in the vertical,
yeah,
tending to that vertical relationship. I mean, when you're in a good place, in a good relationship, healthy relationship with God, and really spending time in prayer and in the Word, just trusting the Lord, not being anxious. I think that's part of probably for me is just realizing as retirement's around the corner, just try not to be anxious about that, what it looks like. But
mhm,
yeah, just tending to that, just life giving, healthy relationship with God, that overflow then I think gives you the ability to have grace and patience and peace with your kids or whoever it may be, those horizontal relationships. So that's a great point there.
yep, amen.
And so in closing here, just I had written down a couple questions for those who are listening. You may be able to reflect on here. Where are you showing up for people in relationships with in your life, or are you? And then who do you show up for? So encourage you to think about, where are you showing up and who are you showing up for? Just reach out and encourage somebody and tell them thanks for their friendship or the relationship, but they're there for you because I think it would mean a lot to them.
Amen.
So, all right, well, thanks for joining us today. We'll be back in about a month. Rick, as always, man, it's just great to catch up, to see you face to face via the camera, anyways. And till we meet again, you guys be blessed, endure, and just pray that what God is putting on your heart that you take that next step.